Dr. Eleanor Weiss sat in her sun-drenched office, surrounded by psychology textbooks and the collected works of Carl Jung. At 42, she was a respected Jungian analyst who had spent her career helping others navigate their unconscious minds. Yet lately, she'd been troubled by dreams that left her unsettled, dreams of running through dark forests, chasing something just beyond her reach. "The shadow always knows before the conscious mind," she murmured, recalling Jung's words as she prepared for her next patient. Sarah Jenkins, 35, entered the office precisely at 4. A successful corporate lawyer, she carried herself with practiced confidence, but Eleanor immediately noticed the tension in her shoulders. "I don't know why I'm here," Sarah began, her voice controlled. "My life is perfect on paper. Great career, supportive husband, financial security, yet I feel like I'm suffocating." Eleanor nodded. "Jung would say that's the psyche's way of telling us something is being neglected. What could possibly be neglected? I have everything I wanted." "Perhaps," Eleanor replied, "but not everything you desire." Over the next weeks, Sarah began exploring the parts of herself she'd long suppressed, what Jung called the shadow. Through dream analysis and active imagination exercises, patterns emerged. "I keep dreaming about a woman dancing wildly under the moon," Sarah confessed during their 4th session. "She looks like me, but she's uninhibited, dangerous even." Eleanor leaned forward. "And how do you feel about her?" "Terrified, but also envious." "That's your shadow speaking to you," Eleanor explained. Jung believed these repressed aspects of ourselves don't disappear. They grow stronger in the unconscious. The desires we deny often become the most powerful. Later that evening, alone in her apartment, Eleanor opened her journal and wrote, "Sarah's journey reminds me of my own unexamined desires. What wild dancer lives in my shadow?" Jung identified the animus as the masculine aspect within every woman's psyche, Eleanor explained during their next session. "It represents our capacity for assertiveness, independence, and critical thinking." Sarah nodded slowly. "But what does that have to do with desire?" "Everything. When the animus remains unconscious, it often manifests as projections onto the men in our lives. We desire in others what we haven't acknowledged in ourselves." Sarah's eyes widened with recognition. "Like how I was immediately attracted to my husband's ambition and decisiveness, qualities I wasn't allowing myself to express." "Exactly. And when the animus remains unintegrated, it can lead to relationship patterns that never quite satisfy. We keep seeking externally what can only be found within." That night, Sarah dreamed of arguing passionately with a mysterious man whose face she couldn't see. For the first time in years, she woke feeling truly alive. Eleanor hosted a small gathering of fellow analysts at her home. The conversation turned to Jung's concept of the collective unconscious. "What fascinates me," said Dr. Marcus Chen, "is how universal archetypes shape desire across cultures. The wild woman, the wise man, the divine child, these patterns repeat." "Yes," Eleanor replied, swirling her wine, "but society's expectations often force these archetypes underground, especially for women." Jung recognized that feminine desire has been particularly subjugated by cultural norms. Dr. Amara Nelson nodded. "The uncomfortable truth is that female desire is complex, encompassing both creation and destruction, nurturing and devouring. Society prefers simple narratives." Eleanor thought of Sarah, wrestling with the complexity of her own desires. "Perhaps our most important work is helping people recognize that their desires aren't simply personal failures or successes, but expressions of archetypal patterns thousands of years old." "That's what makes Jung's insights so revolutionary," Marcus added. "He gave us permission to see our darkest desires not as aberrations, but as essential aspects of our humanity." Sarah arrived at her session looking disheveled, a stark contrast to her usual polished appearance. "I had a fight with Michael last night," she admitted. "I told him I wanted more intensity in our relationship. He looked at me like I was speaking another language." "And how did that make you feel?" Eleanor asked. "Angry, then guilty for being angry, then angrier for feeling guilty." Sarah laughed, without humor. "My perfect persona is cracking, Dr. Weiss. Jung would say that's progress. The persona, the social mask we wear, often develops at the expense of our authentic self." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "But without my persona, who am I?" "That's exactly what we're here to discover," Eleanor said gently. Jung believed that individuation, becoming who we truly are, requires confronting these questions. As Sarah left, Eleanor reflected on her own carefully constructed persona as the wise, composed analyst. What desires had she sacrificed to maintain it? "Tell me about your mother," Eleanor suggested in their next session. Sarah tensed visibly. "She was perfect, the ideal wife and mother. Everyone loved her." "And you?" "I admired her, of course." "Admiration isn't the same as love," Eleanor observed quietly. Sarah's composure cracked. "She made it look so easy, the self-sacrifice, the constant giving, but I saw what it cost her. The way her eyes would go blank sometimes, like she disappeared." Jung believed our relationship with the mother archetype profoundly shapes our relationship with our own desires, Eleanor explained. If we internalize the message that feminine virtue equals self-denial, then pursuing our desires feels like betrayal, Sarah finished, not just of our mothers, but of womanhood itself. Eleanor nodded. "The uncomfortable truth is that desire requires a certain selfishness, a willingness to prioritize our own needs. Many women struggle with this because we're conditioned to be caretakers first." "So what's the answer?" Sarah asked, her voice small. "Integration, not rejection. Honoring both our capacity to nurture and our right to desire." Winter settled over. The city and Sarah's journey took her deeper into her unconscious. Her dreams grew more intense, filled with ancient symbols and primal emotions. "I dreamed I was descending a spiral staircase," she told Eleanor. "Each step took me further from the light, but I wasn't afraid. At the bottom was a door, and I knew something important waited behind it." "The descent is a powerful archetype," Eleanor explained. "Jung saw it as necessary for transformation. Persephone in the underworld, Inanna shedding her garments. Mythologies across cultures recognize that we must go down before we can rise." "But I woke up before I could open the door," Sarah said, frustration evident in her voice. "The psyche moves at its own pace. That door will open when you're ready." After Sarah left, Eleanor sat in silence, contemplating her own unfinished descent. She'd been guiding others through their darkest passages for years, but had she fully completed her own journey? That night, she dreamed of the same spiral staircase. Jung called it the hieros gamos, the sacred marriage of masculine and feminine. "Energies within the psyche," Eleanor explained during their next session. Sarah had arrived looking both exhausted and energized, like someone running on pure adrenaline. "I finally opened the door in my dream," she said without preamble. "Behind it was myself, but also not myself, both a woman and a man, somehow." Eleanor nodded. "The conjunctio, the conjunction of opposites. It's a profound symbol of psychic integration." "It was beautiful and terrifying," Sarah continued. "This figure embraced me and I felt complete, like parts of me that had been at war were finally at peace." That's the goal of individuation, not to eliminate tension, but to hold opposites in creative balance. The desire to merge with another often reflects our deeper desire for internal wholeness. "Is that why relationships can feel so disappointing?" Sarah asked suddenly. Because we're asking another person to complete what can only be completed. Within ourselves, Eleanor smiled. Now you're thinking like Jung. Sarah cancelled her next appointment, and the one after that. When she finally returned 3 weeks later, Eleanor immediately sensed a profound shift. I left Michael, Sarah said simply, her voice steady despite the dark circles under her eyes. After 12 years, I walked away. Eleanor maintained her professional composure, but her surprise was genuine. That's a significant step. What brought you to this decision? I realized I'd been using him as a shield against my own life. He represented security, stability, all the things my conscious mind valued, but my soul wants something else. And what does your soul want, Sarah? Authenticity, the freedom to desire without apology. She paused. Jung talked about the tower. Moment, right? When old structures collapse to make way for something new. Eleanor nodded. The tower represents false constructions of the ego. Its destruction is painful, but necessary. Well, my tower has fallen, Dr. Weiss, and I'm standing in the rubble, terrified and exhilarated. That evening, Eleanor stared at her reflection, wondering what towers in her own life needed to fall. Society has always feared feminine desire, Eleanor explained in their next session. Jung recognized what many cultures have forgotten, that the feminine contains not just nurturing qualities, but also fierce, destructive ones. Kali, Sekhmet, Lilith, these goddesses represent aspects of feminine power that patriarchal systems have demonized. Sarah listened intently. I've been reading about Lilith, the first woman who refused to lie beneath Adam. Yes, she represents autonomous female desire, desire that exists for its own sake, not in service to others. That's the uncomfortable truth many still can't accept, that women's desires need not be domesticated or justified. I feel her in me sometimes, Sarah admitted. This wild, demanding energy that won't be silenced anymore. It scares people. It scares me. Jung would say that's the unintegrated dark feminine speaking through you, not to be rejected, but understood and incorporated consciously. Sarah nodded slowly. I spent years trying to be the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, the perfect professional, all while this other self was growing stronger in the shadows, and now I'm learning to listen to her. She has wisdom I need. Spring arrived, bringing unexpected connections. Sarah reported a series of meaningful coincidences, what Jung called synchronicities. I keep encountering the same symbols, ravens, keys, red shoes. And I met someone. She hesitated. Not romantically, but a mentor of sorts, a woman who creates ceramic sculptures. She's teaching me to work with clay. How does that feel? Eleanor asked. Like coming home to something ancient in myself. My hands remember what my mind has forgotten. Sarah smiled. Jung talked about synchronicity as meaningful coincidences, right? Events connected not by causality, but by meaning. Yes, he believed they often occur during periods of psychological transformation, guiding us toward wholeness. After their session, Eleanor experienced her own synchronicity. A book fell from her shelf, Jung's The Psychology of the Transference. Opening to a random page, her eyes fell on the words, "The analyst must go through the same process they ask of their patients." That night, she wrote a letter to the man she had loved silently for years, a colleague who had never known her feelings. She didn't send it, but the act of writing shifted something fundamental within her. 1 year after their first session, Sarah and Eleanor met for the last time. The transformation was evident not just in Sarah's appearance. She'd let her hair grow wild and adorned herself with bold colors, but in the quiet confidence she emanated. "I'm moving to New Mexico next month," she announced. "I've been offered a position teaching environmental law at the university there." and I'll continue. My ceramics work. How do you feel about this new chapter? Eleanor asked. Whole, Sarah replied simply. Not perfect, not without fears, but whole in a way I never imagined possible. My desires don't frighten me anymore. They guide me. That's integration, Eleanor said warmly. Not the absence of conflict, but the ability to hold tension creatively. As they said their goodbyes, Sarah asked, What about you, Dr. Weiss? Has my journey affected yours? Eleanor smiled. Jung believed the therapeutic relationship transforms both parties. Your courage has inspired my own. Later, alone in her office, Eleanor opened a new notebook. On the first page she wrote, The uncomfortable truth about desire is that it demands our wholeness. Not the carefully curated self we present to the world, but the full spectrum of our being, shadow and light, masculine and feminine, creation and destruction. She paused, then added, Today I begin my own descent.